It is good to see everybody tonight. We are going to take our Bibles and start with the book of Proverbs, chapter 11. Proverbs chapter 11. Of course, the last few weeks we have been talking about the book of Proverbs and the contrasts that are presented in this book, right? Option A, option B. Here's this path, here's this path. But what we also want to remember is that the book of Proverbs is a book of wisdom. And there are contrasts sometimes that are set up that may not necessarily be as laid out as, okay, here's option A, here's option B. One is right, one is wrong. There are times where there are contrasts that are set up where you actually have to think. You actually have to discern. You actually have to use some wisdom. And that's kind of what we want to talk about tonight. There are verses of Scripture that you want to look at and you want to think. The contrasts that are presented, you begin to ask yourself questions. What am I doing? What am I trying to accomplish? What is the end result here? By way of introduction, we're in Proverbs chapter 11. And before I get into too many of the contrasts, let's talk about the wisdom that is needed when dealing with the book of Proverbs and other such passages that are similar, right? You have to have at least some dose of wisdom and discernment if some of these proverbs are going to be of any help to you. Let me show you what I mean by that. Proverbs chapter 11, verse number 14. Proverbs 11, verse 14. Where no counsel is, the people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. Now that again presents what? It presents a contrast to us. And it tells us that if there's no counsel, if you're out there winging it and you're on your own and you won't seek advice and you won't seek counsel, you are potentially setting yourself up to fail. You are alienating yourself from the experience and wisdom of others, and that's just not a wise approach to life, right? No man is an island unto himself. The things that befall us are such things that are common to man. We can learn from others. We can glean from their wisdom. We can learn from their experiences, both positive and negative. I have some people that I admire because they show me the way that is right. There are people that I watch because they show me the way that is not right, right? There are things I learn from everyone. Now, you have to have some wisdom, though, when you consider this contrast, right? Because if you look in the book of Proverbs chapter 13, and verse 20, it says, He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. Now, that lets you know that you actually have to have some wisdom and some discernment when you approach the other contrast. You say, that if the Bible tells me that where there's no counsel, people fail, but in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. Yes, that is a proverb. That is a general principle. What will not help you is if all of your counselors are fools. Solomon would learn that. Solomon would discover that when, or his son would, Rehoboam, when his father died, and the counselors of his father and the older men from the older generation, when they gave Rehoboam counsel, it was different than the counsel his friends from his own age, from the young men that gave him counsel. Now you say, in the multitude of counselors there is safety. Yes, that's good advice. That's good wisdom. But that takes discernment. You have to know that if you are going to surround yourselves with counselors, you should probably select some that are wise, right? You should select some that are indeed wise. You want to walk with wise men so that you be wise. So again, I say that there are some proverbs that won't be of any help to you or won't be of much help if you don't at least apply some manner of wisdom in them. Another example in Proverbs chapter 18 in verse number 22. I use this one fairly often. Proverbs 18 verse 22 says, "Whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing and obtaineth favor of the Lord." That's good. That's good stuff. When a man finds a wife, that is a good thing, and he obtains favor of the Lord. This verse isn't helpful if you marry Jezebel. So, does that make the proverb any less true? No, it doesn't make the proverb any less true. It just means that you actually have to have some kind of discernment, okay, or some kind of wisdom. These proverbs help if you continually build upon them and build wisdom into your life. Now, there are times when the contrasts are obvious, right? There's times when the contrasts are obvious. The diligent versus the sluggard. The diligent has plenty. The diligent soul shall be made fat. But the sluggard is none but desire. He didn't have anything, right? Sometimes the contrast in their labels and their descriptions are just that obvious. Now, sometimes they're a little more subtle than that. Look in the book of Proverbs, chapter 14. Proverbs chapter 14. Verse number 4 says, "Where no oxen are, the crib is clean, but much increase is by the strength of the ox." You have to decide what you want when you talk about a proverb kind of like that, right? The nature of a proverb is sometimes proverbs can be so generic. The nature of proverbs is that because they are generic, they can lend themselves at times to contradictory or contrasting wisdom. Now that's what a proverb is, because a proverb takes such a larger view, right? The 50,000 foot view. There are sometimes that the statements are so generic that they appear to be contradictory. Let me give you a few of those. I actually have a whole list here. I'm not going to give you all these. But you and I have heard these proverbs, and these are just English proverbs, okay? These aren't necessarily things that I'm getting out of the Bible, but these are proverbs that I know that you've heard, right? But because they're so generic, if you don't, with some kind of manner of discipline or wisdom, consider them, you'll think that they can't be right. Let me give you two different proverbs. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? Here's another proverb. Out of sight, out of mind, right? Now, those are both proverbs. Those are both generic statements from a very, very high point of view. Both have their interesting, true principle to them. But they're contradictory, right? You look at those two statements and you say, well, those things, they can't both be right. They can both be right if you consider the intent with which they are said, if you have some kind of manner of wisdom in your consideration of them. Here's another couple. The best things in life are free. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Well, which is it? Well, both, right? Both. How about you're never too old to learn, but you can't teach an old dog new tricks? Or the pen is mightier than the sword, but actions speak louder than words. You have proverbs, whether they are biblical proverbs or they're just proverbs generically. If you go with generic statements, you have to think, okay? You have to consider the intent, consider the situation, and consider the contrast that is laid out. That's what we're talking about here tonight. And there are a few of those in Proverbs where you've got situations where you would look at maybe some contrast and you wonder, Well, which am I supposed to do? Both of these? Am I supposed to do neither of these? Am I supposed to pick one of these? You have to decide that. You have to have some manner of wisdom as you approach these. Now, one of them, as I just read here, is Proverbs chapter 14, verse 4. Where no oxen are, the crib is clean, but much increase is by the strength of the ox. Now, you have to decide what you want, right? And there's the contrast. Is one of these right or wrong? I don't really know. Now, I'm looking at the kids here. You guys don't know much about farming, I'm going to guess. But I'm going to guess you probably don't want to clean up after the ox, do you? You probably don't want to have to take care of it. You probably don't want to have to feed it. You probably don't want to have to, clean off its hoofs when it gets back, and you don't want to have to, you don't want to do all that, right? And they're messy, and they stink, and they go to the bathroom everywhere. And in the barn, you don't want to be in the barn cleaning up after the ox all the time, right? Okay, so guess what? So here's one option. Don't have any oxen. Choose the simple life, right? Now, what does it say here in Proverbs 14, verse 4? Where no oxen are, the crib is clean. No oxen. If you choose the path of no oxen, you've chosen the path that is probably, less work. And if there's no ox in the barn, you don't have to clean it as much. And it's, that's pretty simple, right? That's a pretty easy life. Now, what is the opposite of that?
This is before John Deere.
And this is way before John Deere. But notice the last half of the verse. But much increase is by the strength of the ox. But what I need to tell you is that if you choose a life with no oxen, guess what you did? Your work may no longer be cleaning up after the ox, but now you have to do all the rest of the work. And the amount of effort and the work that an ox could get done in the field and in plowing is certainly going to be more than you're probably going to be able to do individually. So you have a choice. You want the oxen or not? If you got the ox, you got to clean up after it. If you don't want to clean up after it, that's an easy life, right? No oxen, the crib is clean. But you want product done. You want productivity. You want something increased. You want to be able to plow those fields and reap the benefits of it. Guess what? You got to have the ox. Now, is one right or wrong? I don't know that one is right or wrong. We've been able to look at that in past lessons and kind of tell you that that's the way a lot of Proverbs work. And that's true. Hey, option A, option B. It's obvious this one's right, and it's obvious this one's wrong. This is one now you're going to have to chew on it. You're going to have to decide what you want. You're going to have to look at option A and option B and decide which one of these do I want. Do I want the life of ease that doesn't produce very much? Or do I want to have the ox but have to clean up after it and all of those things that go with it? So wisdom. Wisdom becomes important because you would look at this, and Solomon has set up a couple of ideas for his son. Wisdom would have to discern which is more valuable of the two. And there are a lot of proverbs that are that way. And you have to have some wisdom to know that if this is the outcome, you have to know how to apply it. There's one of those in Proverbs chapter 31. Proverbs chapter 31. Here's a contrast that's set up. But it's in the application, right? We have been looking at two different options and the outcome. Let's look at the outcome and work backwards to the options now. Proverbs 31 verse 4. Proverbs 31 verse 4. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes strong drink, lest they drink and forget the law and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted. Give strong drink unto him that's ready to perish, and wine to those that be of heavy hearts. Let him drink and forget his poverty, and remember his misery no more. Now that is what the potential of strong drink is, right? That it can cause you to forget. It can cause you to lose all control, lose all thought process for a while. And so what does he present? He says if that is the outcome, then you have to be wise in how you would discern that, right? If it's true that it can be used as an antidepressant, then give it to maybe someone who's depressed, someone who's in poverty or someone who's about to die. It is not for kings. It's not for those that are in charge. It is not for those that are looking to apply wisdom or apply judgment. Son, if this is the possible outcome, if this is what this produces, you have to have the wisdom to know that you don't need to be participating that. You don't need to be applying that. That is for another scenario. That is not for someone who is looking. What does it say in verse 5? Don't do this lest they forget the law and pervert the judgment of any of the afflicted. He tells you that in either case, that use of strong drink was going to cause forgetfulness, laxness, and he says that this is not for kings and princes. This is not for people that are expected to rule wisely, to make good, responsible, wise decisions. So you have to have the wisdom to know that if the pursuit of this route, if to go down this road produces this outcome, you have to have the wisdom to see that ahead of time. So when there are paths that are set up, when there are options that are available, you have to have the wisdom and discernment to see what the outcome is so that you know ahead of time whether or not you really want to pursue that, whether or not you really want to chase that option or not. Let's look at another one. Look at Proverbs chapter 26. This is probably a more famous one. Proverbs 26, verse 4 and 5. Proverbs 26, verse 4. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou also be like unto him. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. Now, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to answer a fool according to his folly or not? One verse says not to. One verse says to. Now you say they can't both be right. Well, they can't both be wrong either, right? So how do you approach that? Well, if you're looking at Proverbs, if you are looking at general statements of wisdom from the 50,000-foot view, you have to actually think about this. You have to take some time and some wisdom and discernment to consider what's he talking about? What does he mean? Why would he tell me that sometimes I should do this and then sometimes I should not do this? Well, because each path, whatever you decide, has its potential outcome, right? Answer not a fool according to his folly. If you have someone who is foolish, who is obviously has a reputation and a testimony for foolishness, you're going to want to be careful in how you approach them and in how you talk to them. They are likely going to twist everything that you say, make light of the matter, make jokes of the matter, not take it seriously, and as I said, twist everything that you say. And in the end, you're going to end up looking like the fool. There are some people that just thrive on that, right? And you have to know that there are some people that you know what? If I answer him, I'm going to be the one that ends up looking like the fool in this situation. And then sometimes just say, you know what? I'm just going to let this guy go on thinking what he thinks, saying what he says. It's not worth it. It's not worth the effort. It's not worth the time. It's not worth the damage it could possibly do to me in turn. That's an option. That's a good option at times. And I would tell those that are struggling with wisdom and discernment, that's probably the better option than the other one. But You also have to know that if you choose that option, what does it say in verse 5? Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. There are sometimes it's true that a fool needs to be put in his place, lest he go on thinking that he is right. Now, there are some people that are wrong, and they are sincerely wrong, and they don't mean to be wrong, they just are. And there are some people that are fools, and they don't care, and they are glad in their foolishness. And that can be obnoxious, and that can be a strain on the welfare and the peace of the entire community. And the admonition here is that sometimes you answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit, lest he continue on in his way, lest he continue on without any instruction. Listen, it's also true that sometimes the wise person thinks, well, if I don't tell him, who is going to? Right? This guy's been surrounded by fools his whole life. That's why he talks the way he does. That's why he thinks the way that he does. And the only people that ever interact with him are fools. And if I don't tell him, he's just going to go on and never get any better. Things will never change. You say, is that good advice? That's not bad advice, actually. There are some times that if you are wise and you are discerning and you are going with a helpful and intentful spirit there, that, yeah, maybe you could be a help. And you could help someone that's going on in their foolishness lest they go on and then continue to be deceived. You say, so which one is right? You have to decide that. You have to have some kind of wisdom and discernment. That's what we're talking about. You have to look at those kind of situations, evaluate the situation, evaluate the outcome, evaluate the effort that would be put forth, evaluate the potential ramifications. And once you've tried to exercise that wisdom, you either answer not the fool or you answer the fool. Again, I say there are proverbs, and we've looked at a number of them tonight, that if you're just going to throw a big old blanket over it and not actually spend any time thinking on it, chewing on it, praying about it, getting some counsel or some good godly wisdom, there are some times that these statements are so generic, if you don't think, they're not going to be as much help to you as if you really sit and chew on them and focus on them and try to make good godly decisions and live with wisdom. Now, we've seen that in the book of Proverbs, and I don't want to go through all of the scriptures, but you will find that testimony throughout the scriptures. And I can give you a couple of them just from the life of Jesus Christ and some of the things that he said, right? Let me give you a couple of those. I'm not going to have you turn to every verse. But how do you harmonize thoughts like this? Let your light so shine before men, that men may see your good deeds and glorify your Father which is in heaven. But the very next chapter, which is actually the same sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, he would say just a few moments later that when you do your alms, don't do them before men. And don't do things to be seen. And these things go into your closet to do. How do you harmonize that? How do you balance that where he says do some things before men and then don't do some things before men? You have to be discerning. You have to, with wisdom, look at the intent of what is being said and the situation that is presented. It is why we were created his workmanship, right? The Bible tells us we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works that he hath before ordained that we should do. We are supposed to be people who do good works. One of the reasons that we do good works is so that people will see them and they'll give honor and glory to the Lord about them. Now, later he would say that there are things that we are careful, that we don't just do them before men to be seen. If your goal in doing good works is to be seen and for you to get the pat on the back, that's not good. Now, if your goal and your motive is to do good works so that Christ may be seen in you, where Christ gets the glory and the honor, then by all means do those works before men. But if you won't take the time to consider that situation, to consider your motives, to consider the possible outcome of your actions, you're going to look at those statements and wonder which one applies. They both apply. They are both right. That if your attitude and your motive is that God be glorified, and you want to live a life that's honorable so that people see your works and glorify Him, then man, have at it. Do all that you can do for the Lord. If you're doing things to be seen, no, don't do that, the Lord said. There's some things, just go in your closet and do those things quietly. Don't make a spectacle just so that you get seen and you get the honor. There was another time where Jesus was approached by His disciples. And we saw this person over here casting out devils, but he won't go with us. He won't follow after us. So we forbade him. We told him he's not supposed to do that. And the Lord said, forbid him not. For he that is not against us is for us. But Jesus said in another passage that he that is not with me is against me. You say, well, what's the difference? Why would He say one thing one time and one thing another time? You have to take with wisdom the situation and the intention with which it was said. When those people, the disciples were worried about those men following them. And the Lord's like, listen, it's not about them following you. And if they are doing things, He actually said in Mark chapter 9 that no man can perform a miracle and speak lightly of me. And so if they're not against me, they're for me. It's fine. It doesn't matter that they're not following James and John. But in Matthew chapter 12, when Jesus was confronted by the Pharisees and was told, you're doing what you're doing by the power of Beelzebub. And Jesus had to set them straight that no, that's not how this works. A house divided against itself cannot stand. There's two sides here. There's the right side and the wrong side. There's my side and the devil's side. And if you're not with me, you're against me. You can see the difference in the situation, and you have to have wisdom to see those differences, right? When it's Jesus or the devil, yeah, there's two sides, and you're either with him or you're against him. But Jesus could look at His disciples and could tell them that, you're doing what I want you to do, and they're doing what I want them to do. And for you to set up a conflict between yourself, that's not what the Lord was talking about. So you could have potentially contradictory statements that aren't actually contradictory at all if we would apply the wisdom that is necessary. In the book of Galatians chapter 6, and I'll just read this last one because I don't want to belabor the point any longer. But Galatians chapter 6. Galatians 6 and verse 2, it says, to bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. And then 3 verses later, he says, every man shall bear his own burden. Which is it? Do you help bear the burdens of others, or do you bear your own burden? Well, the answer is both. In the context of verse 1 and restoring those and considering yourself like those that have been tempted, and think about restoring those that have been overtaken in faults, there needs to be a compassionate consideration for the sorrows, for the troubles, for the things that are impacting and affecting others. That's what, we as a church should be compassionate in our concern of each other's needs, of each other's, sorrows, of each other's troubles, of each other's worries. And in that sense, we bear each other's burdens. Nobody in this church should feel like they're going through something alone, right? Without help, without prayer, without someone who could compassionately be there and be a help to them. Now, that is not an excuse for any of us to try to shirk our own personal responsibilities. Because in the context of verse number 4 and 5, let every man prove his own work. Now listen, having other people in the church that are there and compassionate toward you and loving toward you and are willing to help you, that's not an excuse for you to not attempt to fulfill your own responsibilities and burdens, right? I'm glad that we have a church that we could call upon each other, and if we had a need or there was a trouble it'd be good to think that we would all be there for each other. Not helpful for us to take advantage of each other, right? It's not helpful for people in a church to shirk their own individual work and personal responsibilities. And so you say, which one is it? Do you bear each other's burdens, or does everybody bear their own burden? It's both. You can approach contrasts and things that potentially appear contradictory with a level head, with wisdom and discernment to know, okay, what is he saying? What is he talking about? Am I supposed to do neither of these? Am I supposed to pick which one of these? Am I supposed to do both of these? There are different verses that we've read tonight where you could look and see any one of those three is an option. I could do none. I could pick option A or option B, or I can do both. And so when you look at the contrast of Scripture, I know this is the fourth lesson, and we've looked at all the variables. And you go down this path, or you go down this path, most of the time it'll tell you that one's right, it'll tell you that one's wrong. It's not always that cut and dry. And there are times that you are actually going to come to the Scriptures and you're going to have to think. You're going to have to pray and through godly wisdom try to discern the Scriptures. You know what they are? They are proverbs. Okay? This is the wisdom of one man to his son. And there are proverbs that if you don't sit and chew on them and think about them for more than 2 seconds, you could potentially miss the blessing and the help that is in there, right? In the multitude of counselors, there is safety, and that's good advice. You know what also is good advice? Don't surround yourself with a bunch of, foolish people. A man that findeth a wife findeth a good thing. You should probably look for that wife, though, in certain places as opposed to others. Both can be true, okay? So I challenge you with that as we've been looking at these contrasts. They will often be easy, simple to understand. There are others that I encourage you to take time and chew on them and think about them, because it's still wisdom. It's good stuff. It's good. It's applicable. It's practical. It's good advice. It's good wisdom. But you will have to chew on it and you will have to apply it. And there are times that right, wrong, or indifferent, or maybe neither option is wrong. You just have to pick one. So the Bible gives us help and wisdom in making good, godly decisions. All right. Let's have a word of prayer. We'll be dismissed. Father, we're